Dealing with Drought is brought to you exclusively by Zematic by Lindsay. Tough, durable center pivot irrigation. Visit lindsayadvantage.com.
Last summer will be one farmers and ranchers will remember for years. Over the next 3 days, Ag Day National reporter Tyne Morgan will paint the picture of the pain the drought left behind, as well as the state of drought today. Tyne?
Thanks, Clinton. The worst drought in half a century swept across the U.S. last year, impacting both livestock and crops. While a few states are still in the worst of it, much of the U.S. is finally beginning to move into the clear. And while the drought hurt last year, it didn't cut as deep as many anticipated, thanks largely to crop insurance and irrigation.
2012 is a crop year many farmers would like to forget. Little rain and scorching temperatures had a crippling effect on plants and livestock across the country. As the water shut off and crops dried up, so did hopes for big yields. That followed what turned out to be a disappointment for farmers along the Missouri River in 2011.
About 75% of our acres were underwater by the first week in June.
This may look like a beach. Unfortunately, it's Shaner's Field, covered with a reminder of flooding in 2011.
It's very surprising to go from one year where there's water standing in your fields to the next year where you can't find a rain.
The natural disaster demolished his crops and left difficult growing conditions to start 2012.
About 10% of our acres that we won't be able to get put back into production for this crop year 2012.
The saving grace for many farmers' corn crop for the 2012 growing year came through one major resource.
This pivot here paid for itself in the extra crops.
Beatrice, Nebraska farmer Rich Sheaves saw firsthand how vital irrigation is when Mother Nature simply doesn't come through.
If it wasn't for that, it would have, all of our crops would have been a disaster out in this area.
By the middle of September, more than 2,000 counties have been declared disaster areas by the USDA. Over the summer, for those who had it, irrigation became the only source of water.
And our irrigated, which is surprisingly running probably slightly better than. Normally we get about 180, 190, and this year we're running 190 to 200.
That out-yielded his dryland acres by well over 100 bushels per acre. It's not just the drought and heat on the 2012 record books. Crop insurance payments also hit new highs. The latest report from the National Crop Insurance Services shows indemnity payments are now totaling more than $15.4 billion for the 2012 crop year. By harvest last fall, it seemed pessimism outweighed reality, as most farmers' hopes were lost after suffering through such a miserable summer. But when the grain finally hit the bin, tones changed as many farmers responded the same way when asked about yields. Surprising.
Corn yields are actually better than anticipated, but they are off of averages by probably 20 to 30 bushel. We've been pleasantly surprised for the summer and lack of rain that we have had. We've been in pretty good shape.
Despite overall yields beating many farmers' expectations, the ripple effect on those relying on grain cut deep. We were told ethanol plants in states like Illinois and Missouri were forced to get grain from areas like Minnesota and North Dakota. It even forced Poet ethanol plant in Macon, Missouri to shut its doors. The pain this winter didn't stop there. The Mississippi River depleted to critical levels, threatening to halt commerce along the major shipping vein.
Restricted tow sizes, restricted draft, less tons per towboat, less tons per barge means you need more barges and more towboats to move the same amount of tonnage.
Thanks to continuous dredging and a little moisture in late winter, the river didn't close. For farmers like Jeff Shaner, the last 2 years have been painful memories. But maybe those memories can be washed away with hopes of a better year in 2013.
And Clinton, with some of the farmers that I talked to, they said if there was a bright spot of this drought, it was the connection that was made between farmers and food. So with the food price inflation that hit headlines to the bacon shortage that we saw last fall, farmers said, well, at least consumers were able to realize that their food actually does come from farmers.
Sure. And you talked a lot about crops and grains. What about livestock?
Actually, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, so make sure you tune in to part 2 of Dealing with Drought as we'll hit on livestock.
All right, good segue. Thank you. We'll look forward to those reports.